Socrates didn't seek to give you answers. He taught you to doubt the answers you were sure of. The method named for him is a patient weapon, a way of turning a stranger into a pupil through questions that pare away certainty until the truth, or at least something like it, drifts into view. But when questions become rituals, when the maze is the point, the tool can invert itself. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the dark side of the Socratic method, not to abandon, but to ask what happens when curiosity forgets its guardrails. In the agora, dialogue is a performance of intellect. Every question is a move, every counter-answer a defense. The aim sounds noble clarity, virtue, a city of better reasoning. Yet power hides in the margins. A question can be gentle as a breeze, and just as capable of steering you into a corridor where you lose your map. It's a choreography of doubt that can become a leash, binding you to the questioner's orbit, not to the truth you once believed you owned. Let me tell you a quiet truth. The Socratic method thrives on disagreement. A good interlocutor isn't a mirror. They're a contrarian wind, pushing your thoughts until they bend. But wind can cut as well as carry. There are rooms where the questions flow like water through a sieve, where a single well-placed prompt isolates your certainty, leaving you to drown in the gaps between your own premises. In those rooms, the search for truth becomes a search for control over the other's mind. Consider the classic Elenchus, the cross-examination that Socrates used to test ideas by forcing their internal consistency. It's mesmerizing when you watch it with fresh eyes, a rapid-fire cadence, a cascade. The illusion is pure. With every layer you peel, you reveal more truth. But the darker version plays out in slower time. The questioner learns the exact tone that disarms, the pause that invites agreement, the confessional moment when power is exchanged for knowledge. And suddenly the truth you seek isn't a horizon you reach. It's a boundary someone else defines. SFX, page_flip. What counts as dark here isn't the act of questioning itself. It's the context in which questions become instruments of social authority. If a teacher can bend the terrain of doubt to their advantage, the student's inner compass begins to point toward a familiar shape, the shape of the questioner's worldview. The mind starts trading independent inquiry for the relief of consensus. The room feels safe because it's predictable. But safety in a tight circle comes at the expense of growth beyond the circle. The paradox is tempting and relentless. The method that promises clarity can quietly cultivate conformity. When a Socratic dialogue is used to certify loyalty rather than test ideas, it becomes a ritual of submission dressed as inquiry. The stakes aren't only about what you think. They're about who you become as you think. 1,000 subtle pressures press inward the expectation to yield, the fear of appearing ignorant, the social reward for agreeable silence. In such spaces, doubt becomes a performance, not a compass. Now, I'm not arguing against doubt. Doubt is the furnace of discernment, a necessary friction that polishes rough judgments into something resilient. The issue is the price at which we purchase doubt, the erosion of autonomy, the surrender of self-authority to a guide who may not always have your best interests at heart. Socrates himself would have argued that true knowledge begins with acknowledging but knowing when to stop asking, and whom the questions truly serve is a form of wisdom that the method itself does not guarantee. Let us look at the social dimension. In a small circle, the one who asks questions often holds the floor longer, shapes the pace, and defines what counts as meaningful disagreement. Over time, this can create a subtle asymmetry. The questioner's curiosity becomes a gate, and the gatekeeper's taste for skepticism becomes a law. The rest of the room learns a set of reflexes how to parse, concede, and move on without ever fully testing the underlying commitments that enable the dialogue. In other words, the method can become a social technology for steering minds, not a searchlight for truth. SFX, soft chime, to their a turning point many ancient and modern thinkers miss. The moment you stop chasing the innocent thrill of insight and start chasing the strategic thrill of influence. When the goal shifts from illuminating confusion to managing it, the dialogue loses its role as a shared climb toward understanding and becomes a stage where one actor negotiates the audience's applause for a partial victory. The risk isn't deception by malice. It's deception by design, an elegant system that rewards the appearance of cleverness over the discipline of accuracy. But why does this dark current work so well in human minds? Because doubt is uncomfortable, and disagreement is a social nerve. The mind longs for coherence, and coherence often arrives wearing the clothes of the most confident voice in the room. The Socratic method, when stretched to its limits, exploits that longing. It can turn uncertainty into permission to defer judgment, to defer responsibility, to defer the choice of what to believe. And in a culture that blesses the clever debater over the careful thinker, such permission becomes a toxin that slowly hardens into conviction, even when the evidence remains unsettled. Yet there's a constructive path through the maze. The dark side reveals a lighthouse, transparency, when the rules of engagement are clear, when the purpose is shared understanding rather than covert influence. The method regains its integrity. If we insist that questioning must be accompanied by explicit aims, clarity of premises, definitions that survive scrutiny, the willingness to retract, then the technique can still operate as a moral instrument. The question becomes not whether we can out-Socratic someone, but whether we can out-clarify our own reasons for questioning in the first place. SFX, soft wind. 3. A practical way to keep the method honest is to rotate the role of questioner, to invite accountability for how questions are framed, to expose the assumptions that lie beneath the surface. Another is to demand a shared standard of evidence, a common yardstick by which we judge the strength of our conclusions, not merely the cleverness of our exchanges. And perhaps most important, to cultivate humility in the student and the teacher alike, the courage to say, I don't know, and the generosity to treat that admission as an opportunity to learn, not a weakness to exploit. If the dark side has a friend, it's historical memory. Socrates taught a method, later voices the sophists, the rhetoricians of power. The political propagandists learned to weaponize it. The line between interrogation and coercion is faint, but real. When we forget that line, we forget the purpose of education, to liberate the mind, not to entrench the commander's will. The true depth of the method is measured not by how deftly a question can pry open a belief, but by how well a person can close the gap between belief and responsibility after the question tears it open. SFX, heartbeat slows. 2. What would happen if we return to the method with a different frame? As a shared instrument for mutual assent, we would require consent to be challenged, not coercively pressed. We would value the silence after a difficult question as much as the clever answer that follows. We would treat doubt as a collaborator, not as a trapdoor. In short, the Socratic method would become a practice of accountability to the truth, to the other, and to... So the dark side is not a verdict against Socrates. It is a warning about human psychology wearing the robes of philosophy. It invites us to reimagine dialogue as a trust-based enterprise. If we keep that trust intact, the old method can still illuminate what matters most, the structures of our thinking, the courage to question our own certainties, and the shared obligation to pursue truth with integrity. The method can still serve enlightenment provided we guard against the subtle seductions of control. As you walk away from this reflection, ask yourself, in your own conversations, where does the edge lie between seeking clarity and seeking to be seen as clever? When do your questions open a door, and when do they hype up your room as power dynamics? The answer isn't a single line. It's a commitment to a slow, honest inquiry that refuses to pretend certainty is the same as truth, and that, perhaps, is the truest test of a question's worth. SFX, resolve chord. 3. If we meet that test, The darkness dissolves into a shared beacon, a practice of thinking that is rigorous but humane, fearless yet aware of its fragility. The Socratic method, kept honest, becomes a tool for liberation rather. It becomes a map that guides us toward understanding, not a compass that points only toward the ego's desired north. The question may be ancient, but the responsibility it carries is freshly ours to carry every time we open our mouth.